Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks you for joining me in my practicum as I take you through the work that I've been working on for my PhD in the last 1 year. I would like to take you through this session where we show you a few of our findings, and I look forward to we all learning from it and then taking your honest feedback. I want to appreciate my professor. Thank you, Professor Ajay, for being a part of this and for all the support and leadership you provided thus far. Thank you very much for taking out time to be part of this. So in this session, I'll be taking us through some of the effects of institutional intermediaries and their impact on scale-up in severe resource-constrained environments, especially in places in Africa. We want to see what is the relationship, what are the impacts, and how does it work. So looking at the introduction, basically, we look at the African business environment, and we know that this is usually characterized by very severe institutional constraints, very severe resource constraints, and this manifests as capital deficit, talent deficit, infrastructural deficits, policy issues, regulation issues, legal framework concerns, and all these are the environment or the context in which startups need to operate. And we've seen quite a number of proliferation of startups and firms around. But what we begin to ask ourselves is, how are these startups able to scale working in such severe institutional constrained environment? We have seen that when institutions are absent or when institutions are weak in an environment, alternatives that are created that fill the vacuum are called institutional intermediaries. These are usually organizations who come in to fill the void where institutions are missing or are weak in an environment. The essence is to be able to lower the cost of doing business, lowering uncertainty by creating some level of predictability and defining the scope and rules of the game for organizations to be able to engage and be able to perform optimally. Therefore, this context gives rise to these intermediaries as substitutes, and they are the ones that allow organizations and firms to be able to scale up. Then, so what again do we define as scale-up? According to OECD 2007, a scale-up company experiences growth in three major verticals. They need to grow by their revenue. We're looking at ability to be able to attract funding, and of course, they're looking at ability to be able to grow in terms of their turnover. And therefore, they've been defined with an organization that has an average annualized growth rate of 20% year on year in revenue growth, employee growth for the next 3 years under which they are being observed. So this determines that startups are organizations that have high growth potential for them to be classified as an organization that is scaling up. So what then are the issues and why are we looking at this study? One of the prominent constraints that startups face in emerging markets is the need for institutions or institutional intermediaries that can allow them to be able to leverage or scale up in spite of the severe resource constraints. Bearing in mind again that emerging markets are typified or defined as markets or countries or locations where there's high market asymmetry and weakness or absence of institutions. So for startups to be able to achieve poverty moderating effect or to be able to scale or have impact in the work they do in the environment, they need to leverage institutional intermediaries that have been created in the talent markets, that have been created in the product markets, that have been created in the information markets, in the regulatory market, and even in the capital market. They need to look for these alternative intermediaries for them to be able to scale up and manage information asymmetry and reduce uncertainty to be able to scale. This presentation therefore offers us valuable insights into the key determinants that influence startups' scale-up activities in the African tech ecosystem. We will look at the unique characteristics and obstacles that is faced by these startups operating within the African landscape. Let me take you through my findings. The findings have shown that on the average, startups in Nairobi scale up 10 times more than their Nigerian peers, despite the population disparity. This goes to show that startups scale up across different locations, that locations matter to ability of startups to be able to scale. Bearing in mind that institutions and institutional intermediaries are localized from location to location. And this shows that this plays an important role when we look at the ability of startups to be able to attract funding as a measure of scale up vis-a-vis their location of base of operation. The second finding we're able to see is the fact that the fintech industry have scaled the most in the African tech ecosystem compared to other tech ecosystems. And what this again has shown is that the industry of the financial industry has been able to have more of their startups be able to achieve scale, grow revenues, attract funding, grow their employees compared to all other sectors of the tech ecosystem. We now did an open-ended question to find out from startups what exactly are the institutions that they have found most relevant for their ability to scale up. What have they found as an institutional intermediary that they have used the most, that assisted their journey and their growth the most? And we found out that startups came back to tell us that regulatory intermediaries and information intermediaries are the two most significant or relevant institutional intermediaries that they found that supported or they've been able to leverage in their scale-up attempts. Then we tried to find out what was the relevance of previous work experience for founders and co-founders of startups in their ability to scale up. And the results shows that previous work experience and the exposures for people to have worked before was a factor that helped startups to be able that have that previous experience to be able to scale 10 times more than those that don't have previous work experience. Which brings to fact that the ability to scale up has previous work experience being a part in it. Then we tried to use, moving away from funds that have been attracted, taking another dimension of scale up. We looked at number of employees vis-a-vis the scale up ability, and we found that using employee growth as a measure, startups that have been able to attract successive funding have been able to scale up much more than startups that have not been able to get successive funding, taking the funding scale sequentially from grants up all the way successively to pre-seed, seed, and Series A and Series B, which shows that for startups that have been able to attract successive funding, they've been able to scale up much more and better and faster than those that have not been able to attract funding. And when we inquired, trying to find out what are the challenges that startups who have not scaled as they will have wished, what do they find as the most challenges or the headwinds that they had in their scale-up attempt? And most came back with funding and access to talent as the two major challenges or the two major areas that serve as limiting factors for their ability to be able to scale up. We tried to also investigate the role of education and found out that education plays a role in an ability of a startup founder to scale their ventures. And we found out that master's degrees holders were able to scale up their ventures much more than every other kind of degree, ranging from first degrees to PhDs to diplomas and of course college degrees. And again, we try to check in terms of gender disparity. Does gender play a role or does gender assist in scale up? And we found out that on the average, male founders have been able to scale their ventures much more than their female counterparts in the African tech ecosystem. And to this end, I would like to share with us the recommendations coming from our findings. We've been able to see that increased focus, we recommend that increased focus on developing and refining policies and regulations that will help to support and strengthen and legitimize the work of institutional intermediaries is likely to help startups be able to scale up the more and be able to help drive the impact of startups in highly resource constrained or high or environment with severe institutional constraints. The other recommendation is in terms of diversification for poverty alleviation or to mitigate the challenges of multidimensional poverty as is seen significantly in African ecosystem, whereby we have about 65% of Nigerians being multidimensionally poor, for example. So we believe that recognizing the need to diversify and intensify support for high impact industries such as edutech, health tech, agri-tech will be able to assist in the poverty mitigating effect and drive the impact of startups to be able to scale in some of those sectors outside of the financial fintech. To also drive diversity and inclusion based on the role that women play in Africa, We believe implementing incentives and implementing initiatives that actively encourage and support women participation in the tech ecosystem by driving programs that focus on that will help increase the diversity in the tech ecosystem and provide more support for women in the tech ecosystem, allowing startups to be able to have more impact and drive diversity and inclusion. We also have the opinion, seeing the role that education plays in the ability of startups to scale up, there is a need for policymakers, including those who are on this call, to rethink the curriculum and the educational agendas to ensure that hands-on experience, exposure at very early age into tech tools, employability skills, and adoption of technology modules should be incorporated into the educational curriculum, such that people who are graduating from school are more future ready and prepared for the future of work, and be able to support the growth ambitions of startups, seeing that talent and funding ranks topmost amongst the challenges that startups face in trying to scale up their ventures. And then finally, we believe that increasing and having deliberate policy which supports bills that have been passed, like the startup bill, which is being domesticated across Nigeria. Such bills and much more bills need to be passed by policymakers, developmental agencies, and governments that will support and stimulate innovation, economic growth, and job creation within the country, such that startups are able to scale more and be able to have more impact in severe institutional constrained environments, as we see in Africa. This, to a large extent, summarizes what our findings and recommendations are, and I'll use this time to be able to take questions from everyone. Thank you very much. Maybe we'll start from my supervisor or anybody who is also in the house. If there's any question, we can take questions now. Thank you very much.
I think those who were virtually online, Victor, missed part of your presentation because you were on mute. But we could see the slides, but I think we could make sense of what you were talking. I think one of the biggest questions, I think comments, which I would like you to pay attention to, I think, is what role do intermediaries play in success of an entrepreneurial ecosystem, and be that in Nigeria, be that in anywhere else. So I think it is worthwhile you thinking through and clarifying, first of all, the role of intermediaries in an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I think it'd be worthwhile you taking a jab at that. And I think my second comment is that your recommendations are very, very powerful. I think they speak to anybody who is interested in examining the role of startups in a setting such as Nigeria or any other emerging economy. What is your opinion on the weightage of these recommendations? So, for example, which of the recommendations you think are actionable in the next 8 to 12 months or 2 years, or which ones are the low-hanging fruits versus which ones require more policy intervention and XYZ? So from your experience and from your survey, from you talking to this, that's my first point, which I would like you to think through, and perhaps you can answer that.
Thank you very much, Prof, and thanks for your leadership and guidance always. I think I'll start from the second question you asked in terms of which do we find as the actionable recommendation, which for me will be the recommendation number 4. We have seen multilateral agencies such as UNDP be able to approach and talk about creating things like the Jubilee Fellowship, which helps to complement the current educational system, which is creating a challenge for startups to be able to get the right kind of talent. because we see startups tell us funding and talent are the major challenges. And looking at that, we think the lowest hanging fruit is to see how we can work around the educational system to provide practical skills, to provide practical hands-on experience, seeing that previous work experience and education also help these startups to be able to scale up. So that again, and we also have a representative of the Ministry of Science and Technology here for Lagos State, which is a sub-regional government. They also oversee the curriculum for STEM in Lagos State. Lagos State is the capital city of startups in Africa. Lagos State has the largest amount of startups in Nigeria. And because we have a representative here, we think, and they oversee the curriculum across STEM, for them, and multinational organizations such as UNDP and GID that are working here, we think that will be the lowest hanging fruits. How do we complement the current curriculum? How do we provide incubation services, acceleration services, support services to students who are currently in the universities and techniques to be able to have on the required experience and exposure to make them job ready and future fit for the field of work. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Prof, for your question. I appreciate that, sir.
I think thank you very much for answering that. I think you put your finger there. I think what you just said also explains, speaks to your survey results. So well done. I think you've done a phenomenal.
Thank you.
And this is for anybody who is on the call. I think, or if you're looking at emerging economies, I think Victor is studying a phenomena which is at the heart of success of not only entrepreneurial ventures but also the contribution they make to the society in general. So I hope you carry on this, Victor. Well done.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you. To the larger house, online or in-house, do you have any questions from anyone so that I can respond within the remaining few minutes that exist? Questions online, you can drop in the chat. We have any other questions in-house around startups and scale-up? Yes, Doctor.
Thank you, Victor. Very brilliant presentation. And I want to encourage you because this, you can use it for your final dissertation. Because it's practical. But there was something I wanted to talk about on the recommendation, so I want to tie it to Nairobi. Yes. Because I do so many things there. You are very strong in empowering women in tech because of the inclusion and the diversity, and because of their stable government policy.
Yes.
Nigeria can learn from Nairobi, though it's smaller than Nigeria, but stable government policy. And also, let me address the educational system. Just a comment.
Yes.
There's a new I teach at the University of Lagos. So there's a new curriculum now. The university system across board in Nigeria. Yeah. So entrepreneurship, startup system, everything is there. Because I teach MBA student entrepreneurship. And in my class is practical. Because book is different from being on the streets. Yeah. And I just want to commend you because the recommendation, the 5 of them are so powerful. So I want you to hold on to this topic. You can probably convert it to your dissertation because it's broader and it's all encompassing.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I appreciate that. Akim, representing Lagos State government, can you also tell us?
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so I looked at the fact that men have been able to raise funds more than women or female in technology. Is it because there are fewer women, or was it the average that you used in this?
We had 246 respondents to our questionnaire, and what we found out was that 70% of the respondents, again, was the bias, were men. Which shows that even from the sample size that were drawn from a random sample size from the ecosystem across all the locations, across all the cities, we found out that there were more female founders and more male founders and co-founders in the ecosystem, and that's why we've given the recommendation that there should be a deliberate policy to be able to encourage women to come into the tech ecosystem and to ensure that there are deliberate programs to empower women to take up jobs and take up career in the tech ecosystem so that we can begin to see more women lead technology organizations and firms. We believe that this will help drive inclusion, diversity in the ecosystem, and ultimately help to drive economic growth and development in our societies and communities.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, this is a comment. Thank you, Mr. Victor, for that presentation. It was a good one. Just an additional comment. In the slide where you analyzed the speed of scaling up, right?
Yes.
It showed that Nigeria was really slow. That means to start businesses are easy, but to scale up is difficult.
Yeah.
I think we need to look at policies or recommend better ideas for scaling up in particular. So it's not just about starting the business, how do people scale up?
So again, I quite agree with you. When we look at it, the population of Nigeria is about 205 million people compared to Nairobi, and we think there are far more, about 3 times, the number of startups in Lagos compared to Nairobi. However, we think that policies and institutional fabrics and institutional intermediaries across different locations affect the abilities of startups to be able to leverage in that context to be able to achieve some scale up. So I agree with you. That's why part of the first recommendation was for government to be deliberate in legitimizing more institutional intermediaries, empowering more institutional intermediaries, giving support to more institutional intermediaries to ensure that they are able to leverage, that startups are able to leverage them in the absence or in the presence of weak institutions or absence of institutions to be able to scale up in any of the sectors where they find themselves. I'm not sure, is there any question online?
Okay, where I think someone using Joba.
Okay, let's take from Joba, please. Thank you very much, Joba. Yeah, I quite agree with you. And if you see the slide that is up right now, you'll find out that we've seen countries like Morocco, where they've got a very vibrant ecosystem. We've seen that places like Botswana, we've seen places also in the southern part, which is Cape Town, which is also part of South Africa. We've seen people in the north and the southern hemisphere being able to leverage more ability to scale up. And again, you talked about government. When there is absence of these institutional intermediaries, we need to see policymakers, including some of the people on this call, able to be deliberate to legitimize or support the works of institutional intermediaries. And a typical example in the financial sector is the credit rating bureaus. All over the world, credit rating bureaus are not government organizations, but credit rating bureaus are recognized and their work and their outputs are legitimized for nations to borrow. When we talk of Fitch, we talk of Moody, even rating agencies, for example. Rating agencies are not government, but rating agencies' work are recognized by government, and it gives validation for people to be able to take risk or information about how a particular, for example, investment is or the risk of a nation. That's what you see around rating agencies. Credit rating bureaus are also organizations. that has been legitimized, and they can be able to give people credit score, which also determines all other benefits, and other people can build on it to be able to reduce uncertainty that characterizes difficulty in emerging markets. Because basically what typifies an emerging market is when you have weakness of these institutions, or what we call a asymmetry in the market forces asymmetry, which to a large extent helps drive up the cost of doing business because people are not sure the rules of the game. So when government is not able to actively play these roles with formal institutions, their ability to partner, to support, to legitimize and recognize institutional intermediaries who are solving this work will help drive the growth by reducing those information asymmetry, reducing the uncertainty, and therefore help startups who are young organizations be able to grow rapidly. And that is what we've seen in other countries like Nairobi, like South Africa, like Morocco, where their rating agencies, their credit bureaus, their company registration agencies under regulatory intermediaries are a lot faster and a lot more effective than we see. And then on a final note, again, when you look at the fintech industry in African ecosystem, we find that the fintech industry is the most regulated. However, despite being the most regulated, it has the highest amount of startups that have been able to scale up. What this they tell us is that when the rules of the game is defined, when players understand what is expected and intermediaries around there are legitimized, startups are able to scale more compared to where the rules are not defined and we don't have the institutions that are providing the support. Thank you everyone for being a part of my practicum and sharing and taking time to listen to the work that I'm working on and to give your honest feedback and advice. Thank you, Professor Ajay, and thank you for everyone in the house. And I appreciate it. Thank you for your feedback. We'll work on some of your recommendations, and I hope that you'll be available to join me on subsequent practicum when we do send an invite. Thank you very much.